If you take 30 seconds before a high stakes situation and do this, you will have measurably better outcomes. Stay right where you are. Welcome to How to Get What You Want. This podcast is for driven women ready to claim their goals and navigate their careers with clarity and confidence. Join me as we explore real stories, tools, and strategies to help you steer your career exactly where you want to go. Let's get started on helping you get what you want. Hey, friend, I am happy that you are spending time with me today. I wish that I could see you and we could have a dialogue, but I'm going to really be thinking about you as I go through this because this is a very personal one. And I really struggled with this concept early on. And it sounds funny. I pause when I say that because it sounds funny to me that I struggled with it because now that I've lived with these concepts longer and longer, I understand them. But I wanted to share this because it feels very vulnerable to me to really understand these aspects of a negotiator. And it applies to every situation that you face that's high stakes. So you can use this today, you can use this tomorrow. And that 30 seconds is the important aspect of it. So what I'm talking about are the stakes of the deal and the interests. And I want to talk and spend some time having you think about the difference of those two and understanding that I come at this going through years of, yes, I understood what those were, but I didn't really get the dimension of applying both of those. So I thought I've really worked on how do I distill it down? And so when I think about stakes, those are the invisible scoreboard. And what I mean about that is that it's the things that are relevant to the deal. It could be the money, the price of the product, the SLAs, the time, the market share, the reputation. They're the things that you might think about in a negotiation as the common attributes that you're discussing, the deal points. The thing is, I think about the piece of the pie and all the aspects of a deal. Those are the elements that are really important for a new role. It could be salary, benefits, time off, stock options. And then the interests are really the fuel, the invisible fuel in the deal. It's what's important to that individual. It's what's important to get them to say yes. And it isn't always the stakes. It's a little bit more personal. So for instance, when you think about stakes of a deal, there are underlining interests. So to that person on the other side of the table, maybe they have been told they had to have this position filled, and the interests are timing for them because it'll make them look good. It'll relieve that stress that they have. Interests when you're thinking about a meeting or when people are pulling together about something, the interest could be the optics that they're involved in this project. It could be exposure in seeing that they're a part of this team. It could be experience. They've never done it before, and this is important to them to have this experience to allow themselves to trial and error before they get better at it. So the interests are what's specific to the person. So when you think about Harvard, when I went to a negotiation course there, they said before we go into a scenario, and they have you do scenario after scenario with these people you don't know from all around the world. And it's like, oh, I don't want to do another scenario because it's really complicated. You have to think about the stakes. You have to really understand the scenario because it's completely foreign to you. And then you're trying to negotiate with somebody that you don't know. And they would say that they, from time and time again, they tell one group to consider the interests of the other party for 30 seconds before you walk in. And then they'll tell the other group, they'll give them no such direction. And what they have found time and time again is that the groups that were thoughtful for 30 seconds about the interests of the other party had measurably better results. So think about that. If you just reorient yourself to think about those interests, because we're so focused on the stakes. the attributes of the deal that are just kind of bubble up. There are the things that we often talk about, but the interests are the underlining. And when I went to Harvard, they talked about the secret sauce is the interest of the other party. And we commonly don't focus on that as much as we should because we're so focused on the deal points, the things that are so tangible, the items that are going to go into the contract. When you think about it like that, it's the things that are written in, the things that are defined, and the interests are can be aligned. That's what makes it tricky. It can be aligned to the stakes, but very often they're not. They are what's important at that individual. So it's really important to think about that because interest can be additional currency in the deal. It could be flexibility in the schedule that might be important to somebody. It's that credit for doing something. And it might not cost you anything, but to serve their interest makes them feel like they were understood, they're seen. It builds the rapport and the trust in the relationship. And it makes them feel good about the outcome. When you don't service your interests or the interests of the other party, it kind of feels a little bit like a flat deal. Yeah, it's a fine deal, but when you can really understand what's important to the other party, that's really the cherry on top. That's a really good way of saying it. I think that's really key. The interest is going, what's important to this person? What's important to them so that they can get the deal? So I mentioned the Harvard. There's also the Lewinsky and Brett study in 2005. They said that negotiators who framed the task around satisfying interests were more likely to agree to and reach agreements that made both parties feel really good and walk away. And Zelensky did a simple perspective taking and increased the discovery of hidden win-win deals by looking at 3 different studies and found that pure empathy sometimes hurts outcomes because you don't understand the interests, what's important to them. So just being able to, in the moment, show empathy isn't as powerful as really understanding their interests. So when you think about the stakes, think about the scoreboard, think about the things that will be memorialized in the contract. What are the things that are the deal points that you automatically go to? And think about the interest as the fuel. What will it take that person to feel really good about the outcomes? And so the leverage in the deal is really being able to understand the stakes, consider the interests, and aligning those so that the outcome allows you to get to where you want to go. So interest can be leverage as well as stakes. So when you think about the leverage of the deal, it's all of those aspects. And the more that you consider the interests, the stakes, the more agility you have in the moment to satisfy what you need and what the other person needs. And they're rarely the same. Hey, Susie here. Thought I'd pop in. I wanted to let you know I've been an executive coach for over a decade. I work with executives and they call me their silent partner because I help them increase their confidence when they're facing really difficult decisions. If you'd like to see if we're a good fit, head over to SusieTalmanchuk.com and fill out an application. I'd love to hear from you. Just this week, my friend Megan and I were talking about her experience as an executive, as a software engineer in the organization where she worked. And she was explaining to me that she did the Q&A of the software. So, when all the code is done, Q&A takes some time to really get through the bugs. And it's important because, right, that relates to customer experience and it affects everybody in the organization because if QA doesn't do a great job, then they get more calls, people get frustrated, it takes more time, it takes away resources. So she was the head of the department and she got notice that they were going to get the code and they would only have 2 days to do the shakeout, do the Q&A. And she was just beside herself because she needed more than a few days. she needed a few weeks to do it really well. And through her experience of doing this, she got burned so many times because she would get complaints from her colleagues when the bugs were found. It would make her look bad, her reputation. So her position on this to push back was her reputation. The people in her organization, they depended on her, they trusted her to make sure that she kept the boundaries. And so she went right to the top. She went to the CEO and she said, "Nope, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to release this in 2 days." He listened to her, he understood, and he explained to her that this would be a market differentiator. They needed to get this out in 2 days because they could claim that they were first to market, which was huge for them as a competitor in the space. And so as a company, that was really important. So that was the stakes that she didn't understand. She explained her interests, which made him understand what was important to her. Had she just gone, "I'm not going to do this," and didn't explain any context around it, he would have just probably did a power play and said, "Nope, I'm going to do it. This is just what we're doing for the business." Without that additional color about why and what's important, they wouldn't have been able to service each other's needs. When my friend Megan understood, she was able to ask for some concessions from the CEO. So that would satisfy her interests. And because he understood what her concerns were, and she understood what was at stake and getting it out quickly, they had a conversation about how they would move through it. So what was really important to Megan was that the CEO communicates to everybody that this was his choice and that she, would have liked to have more time to consider or to let her team really work on the Q&A and the bugs, and that the frontline people, that the call centers that took the calls would understand that there would be bugs in this release and that she wouldn't get blindsided by a lot of complaints, the vision of her as a leader, and so that she could communicate to her team how they were going to frame this up. Those were her interests. Her interests were, she understood the stakes for the company and she had to align with those. But satisfying her interests was really important to her and her team as a leader. And that's the lens she took. I think about times where I had a deliverable in the organization where I worked. Let's just say I had a deck that needed to be done for my leadership, and I would ask somebody to help with it, not even giving them anything additional to doing that, but I would just ask for their time. "Can you look at these slides? Can you put this data in? Can you give me this? Give me that?" And I remember one time I had a colleague that I had gone to before, and the next time that I had done this, he basically said no. And I asked him why. I wanted to better understand. And he told me that the last time I had asked him, I didn't give him credit. And nobody knew that he was a part of that process. And that was important to him because that showed that he was aligned. It was important to his influence. He didn't get a lot of exposure to the senior team. So him not getting credit when I presented was detrimental to him. And I didn't even realize that. I didn't even think about it. The simple thing to get help from him just meant that I gave him credit. I mean, I have to say, I learned a bigger lesson around that about not being so self-serving, but understanding what's important to my colleagues, what's important to the people that work for me is powerful in motivating them. When you can align the interests of people helping you, that allows you to get what you need, and then it also serves them. That's why interests are so powerful. And I love that idea of what Harvard said about really reorienting yourself in those 30 seconds before you walk in. Because even if you spent a lot of time preparing, that reorientation allows you to see it from their side. And you can pick the words that you need to. I was thinking about a funny example too when I was in the PTA back when my kids were younger, and we would have an event, and I would be so busy, and they would ask me to go make something. And I was just like, ugh, I didn't want to do it. I wouldn't sign up for that. But this one woman had loved doing that. She loved cooking. She loved being the one that brought like the cookies. Like that was just really inspiring to her. That was just something she enjoyed. She enjoyed doing. But as a working mom, that was super hard for me. It brought me zero joy. And when I said to her, I would be happy to pay you to make these, I don't even need the credit, but I want to feel like I contributed. She was like, oh my gosh, absolutely. I would love that. That would be so helpful to me so that I wouldn't have to pay for all of the ingredients. See, understanding your interests and being able to articulate that can unlock another combination of a result or a solution to the equation. You know, the equation of what's important to you is not always the same as the other party. All right, so some things to think about, some tips that you can take, and I want you to frame this around what do you have coming up? Meaning like just a regular meeting that feels a little uncomfortable. Maybe you don't have the right experience. Maybe you've not met with the person before. You don't know them well, or you have history with them, or just a difficult conversation that you have with somebody on your team. You have to give them feedback. All of those examples you can apply thinking about the stakes and the interests of the other party. And making that shift allows you to see it from their side. So the first tip is to really think about the stakes. Start there. What is kind of on the table? What are the things that are important about the conversation? What are the items that you need to make sure that you cover? And what's important to make sure that those stakes, okay, what to cover with that other person? What's important to you in terms of what's at stake? Is it the timing of it? Is it that they understand? Is it that they land? Is it that you give them examples? What are the pieces of it that are going to put the story together? And what are the stakes for them? What are the things that they need to understand about it? You have to give them feedback. That is a part of what you do as a leader. And so they need to understand that that is a part of the relationship you hold. So that's a stake. That's something that is kind of on the table. What is important to get them the better? And so when you think about moving into a conversation, what are the things that are the outline, the things that are important? Because the interests are the color in. So go through and list out every possible stake that is associated to that conversation so that you can be really clear. When you do that, you allow yourself the ability to maneuver in an agile way because you've considered the stakes for you and the stakes for the other party. So don't limit yourself, brainstorm. And even if they don't come up, it doesn't matter. So the more prepared you are, the better. And then the second one is to apply that Harvard great piece. Take 30 seconds, pause before you go in, be intentional. How can you think about what's important to the other party? What do they want? And maybe it's a difficult conversation you're having, and the interest is they want to get better. And that it's really important to them that they understand this so that they can apply it. So when you think about what's important to them, it changes your orientation from, dread, I have to do this, to this is helpful to them because it's going to service this need, this interest for them. And if it's a job that you're going for, if it's talking to a colleague about a project that you want to lead, think what's important to them. Remember that example that I gave where I didn't consider the interests of the other person I was asking help from. Just simply being able to give that person credit gave them exposure. So within a corporate environment, those are things that are important. And sometimes people's interests, they don't have it at the top of their mind. So it's okay to ask. What is important to you? I need this done, and I would love to explore what is important to you that I can give back to you. What would you like from me? And that can help you discover those interests. But when you walk in right before, try to brainstorm of what might be important to them so that you are poised to ask that right question. And the last one is to really frame in when you think about framing your ask or how you're framing the conversation. How can you illustrate that you've considered their interest? Frame that in. You know, as I was moving into thinking about our time together and what my goals are, I was also considering what might be important to you. And I want to make sure that we move toward this. But I want you to know that this is the value I bring, and I recognize that these are the important aspects that are important to you. So framing that in illustrates that you've already been thoughtful about what's important to them. And even if you're not quite right, it's okay because you can allow them to sharpen that edge for you. So thinking about those ways of moving in and how to frame it. So gauge the stakes. Think about the stakes that are at play for you and the other party. Use that pause, that 30 seconds, that's to give yourself measurably better results by considering the interests of the other party before you walk in, and then discover more while you're there. And then the third tip is to frame it in. Help them understand that you've negotiated with yourself to help them have the best outcome that you possibly can. So, how can you apply this in the next week? This was such a fun one for me because I've evolved in understanding these concepts, and I like to share it in a way that makes sense to me because there's people like you that may not have as much exposure on a regular basis to the concepts of stakes and interests. So remember that stakes are the scoreboard, you know, they're the things that are on top of the table, and the interest is the fuel. It's kind of the things that are underlining that you might know or you may need to discover. So I want to challenge you to really use this, even if you don't do all those tips, even if you start to practice just spending time, that 30 seconds, think about that. Measurably better outcomes by considering the interests of the other party before you walk in. How powerful is that to change your orientation in that way? So make yourself a reminder when you're going into that meeting is how can you set a timer and consider and just brainstorm out loud what is important to them? Experience, exposure, credit, spending time with you. What are the things that are important to that other person? I think this is such an important topic. And we tend to hear that about stakes and interests and leverage when we hear about negotiation. So it's interesting to explore it because the application of these strategies into your everyday allows you to step into yourself and out of your head and second guessing yourself. It gives you the ability to source information by considering what are the stakes? What are the interests? It focuses your brain not on the conversation and the high stakes and the emotion that we want to avoid, but it gives you a way to move through it with intention. And it allows you to have access to the data, the information, the interests of the other party so that you can help them have a great outcome while you're getting what you want. I'm so glad that you made the choice to be here today. If you feel like somebody needs to hear this as well, feel free to share it. Love if you did that. And if you want a deeper dive into these concepts, I always share my story on my newsletter that I send out every Monday. I'd love for you to join the network, join the community of practicing these strategies so that we can always be mindful and intentional about getting what we want, no matter what that is. Go to negotiationlove.com to sign up. And if there's a topic you want me to cover, feel free to reach out. Until next time, always remember that negotiation is more than a skill, it's a mindset. So put it in place so you can get what you want. I'm Susie. I'll see you soon.